Welcome to Vital Organs, paramount to the physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. I'm Nate, and welcome to my podcast. This season is titled Issues of the Heart. We will be focusing on how we protect our hearts and making sure that we are fulfilling its desires. You're listening to Vital Organs, the podcast. Welcome to episode 4, titled The Heart Attack. A heart attack occurs when the flow of blood to the heart is blocked. The blockage is most often a buildup of fat, cholesterol, and other substances which form a plaque in the arteries that feed the heart. Sometimes a plaque can rupture and form a clot that blocks blood flow. The interrupted blood flow can damage or destroy part of the heart muscle. I am honored to be joined by my mom. I want to start this episode off by simply telling you that I have never seen someone as strong as you. You have been dealt a tough set of cards that would cause many people to fold and give up. But yet, here you are, stronger than ever, and you are finally putting your needs before anyone else's. In the last Issues of the Heart with Lauren, we discussed how heart murmurs can cause major damages and holes in the heart, which causes blood not to circulate properly in the body. Although we've had many triumphs, celebrations, and blessings, you have experienced many heart attacks throughout your life. However, your heart attacks they have not been fatal. In the last episode, you shared how you and Dad's relationship started. However, you did not know what the journey was going to be like.
No idea.
What were some of those highlights in the beginning that you and Dad had experienced?
Oh man, just one child. We were a ready-made family. We came fresh with one, and we did traveling. Mm-hmm. Not extensively, but we like to go to Terre Haute a lot, and we were very simple people. Now.
Yes, we were.
And so, that we would go to Terre Haute, visit Granny, eat up all her good food. All
of it.
And then we would make stops at different places in Terre Haute and get this garlic bread from the spaghetti shop.
Square donuts.
That is a real thing. And if you've not had them unless you got them from Terre Haute.
You got to get them from Terre Haute.
And we would stop at, it wasn't Cinnabon, but it was a cinnamon roll place just like that. And I used to bring cinnamon rolls home to my dad and to Sister Miller sometimes.
Yep, I remember those.
So, that was a getaway for us.
Yeah.
With the kids, we didn't have to have a hotel or anything like that.
And it was quick. And we all loved going down there. We loved going to Terre Haute, sitting on Granny's front porch. The only reason why she used the front porch was to be nosy about the people across the street.
Yeah. We had one aunt at one end of the street, of 14th Street, and Granny was on the other.
Yeah.
And they would let each other know what was happening in between. So it was a good time. It almost felt like, I think to the kids, maybe like they were going to the deep south.
It kind of was. You know how when we were kids, you used to read the book The Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963, by Christopher Paul Curtis, who was also a Michigan native. And they took trips down south to visit their grandparents. And a lot of people back then took trips down south and spent the summers with grandparents. And we didn't necessarily, you would stay down there with us, but it was like going down south to go to Big Mama's house. And the Kool-Aid that she had.
Oh, Granny's Kool-Aid was like crack.
It was. And the chitlins she would make Dad.
Ugh, I'm not talking about that.
No?
Not talking about that.
What were some other experiences that you and Dad really enjoyed doing early on in the marriage?
What did we do? He never missed work, for one thing.
No,
And so when we did plan trips, and we always included the kids, there was two trips that we didn't let the kids go on. And that was one, we had one of our anniversary trips. We went to Cedar Point overnight. Mm-hmm. And then one of the other ones, he surprised me on our 5th anniversary with tickets to Georgia to fly. I had never flown before.
Was this when you visited Aunt Debbie and Uncle Brent?
Yes.
Yes, I remember you guys left us here.
And for our anniversary, I left you here? Yeah, they act like I abandoned them.
You did abandon us.
Well, one of the fun things that we did, we spent our anniversary riding rides at Great America.
Yeah.
My niece and nephew both had worked there, and we got free tickets. Mm-hmm. And we had a ball.
And I remember when we got older, when Dad became immobile, he we went to Six Flags, and
We used them.
we did. Our dad,
We played the handicap card.
my dad could not ride the rides, but because he was in a wheelchair, we got to go up the exits and cut everybody in line. So we were very privileged in that way. And we've never experienced standing in line at Six Flags
Not
for
there.
hours like other people did.
Nope.
So, I mean, there was benefits of him being disabled. I remember there was one Christmas.
Ugh.
What was that Christmas like?
Okay, we lived on Steel Road. No, we didn't. It was not Steel Road. It was Day Lake Road. And he had worked for a place called Big Lots. Everybody knows Big Lots.
Big Lots.
He used to be an assistant manager there at a couple different Big Lots. And this particular one was at a place called Buyers Marketplace. It was on US 31. It used to be called 31, not 33 or whatever it is. But it was like an outlet mall type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we had some relatives over for Christmas. This man, I can't say what I was just getting ready to say, but
No, she cannot.
this man
Keep it PG.
brings out these gifts. First of all, some of them were trash. I don't even know what they were supposed to be. And he got me a sweater, and he was so proud to tell somebody that he got the sweater for $3. And everything was on clearance, and he just thought that was the best thing ever. And I let him have it.
You did.
I didn't let him have it in front of people, but I let him have it. And the next Christmas, I had stuff from, well, back then it was Hudson's,
Ellis Ayers.
J.C. Penney.
You were really hurt by that.
Oh, I was.
Because I think you talked about how you went out and you got him good gifts.
Oh, I did. Good cologne, all of that. And
he went bargain shopping.
yep.
He went digging through boxes.
And
to
he
find
thought
something
it
in your
was
size.
he thought it was just really great. I wasn't even fat then. So sheesh.
Sheesh, goodness. 4 years into your marriage, you experienced one of the first heart attacks, and that was when Dad was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So kind of talk about the beginning of that. How was it like going to the doctors, getting that diagnosis, and how did that affect you guys in that time?
You know, he had a few appointments that I didn't go to.
Mm-hmm.
And he found the doctor on, it's not like WebMD because they didn't have that back then, but like Ask a Nurse or something like that. They recommended a doctor at the South Bend Clinic, which was Dr. Jesse Say. Best decision ever in our life was that relationship that we had with Dr. Say.
Yes.
Even when your dad passed, he and his nurse sent a card.
Yeah.
So he went to the first couple appointments by himself. He had been misdiagnosed from other doctors in another town.
What were some of those? Do you remember any of those diagnoses?
Yeah, one of them said that the numbness in his hands was Raynaud syndrome, which it is a thing, but it wasn't his thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they called stress some of it, probably.
Mm-hmm.
But, he wasn't a guy that was super stressed. He did everything going to work like clockwork.
Yeah.
And, but the diagnosis came pretty quickly because Dr. Say didn't beat around the bush. And he said this numbness in your hands, and he had optic neuritis once in college, and then it came back again. And he said, most people don't have optic neuritis twice.
Right.
Unless they have multiple sclerosis.
Yeah.
So that was, because
how did you guys take that diagnosis? Did you know what multiple sclerosis was at that time?
I very well knew what it was because my best friend, cousin, sister, Julie, her aunt Susan had MS, and I used to spend time with their family in Grand Rapids. And I remember being a teenager and watching Uncle Fred scoop Aunt Susan out of the car, carry her into the house so she could visit with her mom. And when your dad got diagnosed, I asked him, did he want to talk to Aunt Susan? And he said, no, he didn't. He wasn't ready for that.
I mean, I probably would agree with him.
Yeah.
Because if you have something that
you don't want to go see someone who
is so far off, and that's like visiting
Yes.
a cancer patient that,
yes.
about to take their last breath. You don't want to see the end result of what
And see, I totally get that part, but she was so full of God's spirit and scripture and things like that, which I don't think he was really thinking of at that point.
No, he was just seeing what the possibilities could be with him.
Yes, and he wasn't ready for that.
Right. What were your feelings when you first found out? Like your personal feelings when you got the diagnosis, this is what the possibilities of how it could affect his body. How did that affect you?
I did not worry about it at that point because he was still walking and working, and I looked at what was in front of me.
Right. Not
what could
all
happen.
the what ifs.
Yes.
And
if we lived our life on what ifs, we wouldn't ever.
I was just about to say that you couldn't.
Nope.
Because there's always the what ifs, and our mind automatically goes to the negative side.
Right. What if I walk out the door to go to work and break my leg?
Right.
I won't ever go to work
and get in a car crash? But you got to look at the moment and live in the moment.
And that is exactly what I did. It was God was so gracious to us, Nate, that every part that Dad transitioned to, God had something there waiting for us.
Yeah.
To help it, to make it easier. And I just can't. Only God could do that.
Only God.
That's it.
And because I talked to my friends and stuff when he passed, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it was stages to it. He went to the nursing home, so we weren't expecting him to be home every day, walking in the house or seeing his wheelchair. God was gradually preparing us for
when he wouldn't be here.
Yeah. How'd you maintain your heart health during that time? I know you said that you focused on the moment. Yes.
Well, people finally realized that I kind of needed some time away. And because it was wearing on me a lot. I had home daycare, a bunch of little babies running around. He could help with that a little bit, just holding the babies, feed the babies or whatever. But I was getting burnt out. And so the first time, just my immediate family, my brother and sister-in-law, they put in some money and got a local hotel room for me. And it was around my birthday. So that was great. That turned into once a year, they allowed me to go somewhere.
We allowed her to go somewhere. It was her yearly getaway. She would say, I'm going to my getaway.
And oftentimes I go to Grand Rapids for my getaway. I was always alone on my getaways. I also had a getaway to Chicago.
And the difference between you and me with that, you can go by yourself and be fine. I sit in a hotel room and I'm ready to go when I walk in. Like, I could be sitting at home laying in a bed versus sitting out somewhere.
Nope, because in that hotel room, nobody was saying, Jackie, can I get a mint?
Right. Can I get some water? Can you put me to bed?
Jackie, what are you doing? Jackie, turn the TV. Jackie. I got to tell you one thing.
Okay.
That I did to your dad that wasn't very nice.
Oh, God. Don't say anything on the terms that may incriminate you.
It's not.
Okay.
It won't. There is a show that comes on like the Wii channel, I think, and it's called Snapped.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
It's about women.
He hated you watching the show.
Yes, and I would turn it on purpose. And he couldn't work a remote or anything anymore. And he would say, Jackie, what is this? I said, it's men's educational television. And if you do not watch it and pay attention, it could happen.
It could happen to you. It's just like watching Lifetime. Fast forwarding several years, we talked about in the last episode, one of my memories of how the church had really supported us was when you lost the baby and how they came and brought food and made sure that we were good.
Yep. Can I tell you one more thing? You asked me about how I dealt with some of the, the caregiving and being alone, and how did I had the little getaways, but there was one particular person, and I'm not going to tell her name because she might not be happy with me if I did, because we went to church together.
Still go to church together.
We still go to church together.
I think I know what you're talking about.
And she asked me, how are you? How are you? And I was like, this, that, or the other. And she said, meet me at Movies 14. But it wasn't 14 at the time.
Right.
She said, meet me over here at such and such time. And I met her there. And she took me to see the Kings of Comedy.
And let me tell you something about that, because the Kings of Comedy had some awful, foul, profane language. You wouldn't even let us watch movies that said like the D word or the A word, and you'd be like, oh my God, the language in this show. But you can go with somebody from church after church at that and watch The Kings of Comedy with Steve Harvey and Bernie Mac and whoever was in it.
Oh, what's his name?
I've never seen it
Oh.
because I wasn't allowed to as a kid. I still, when I sit down and watch movies with you, when they're like dropping F-bombs, I'm like, I'm sorry, Mom.
We'll watch it after we're done with this. Right?
Yeah, we'll see.
But we laughed and laughed and laughed through that whole thing. And we still joke about it.
Yeah.
Because she was like, if you tell that I took,
Yep.
she said, I'll get kicked out of church. She really wouldn't. But,
No, she wouldn't.
you know, that was when we were churchy.
Yes.
So they would understand now, though. But, okay. I'm sorry. I threw you off
So
track.
back to the discussion of when you lost the baby. Kind of go through that process. I know that you and Dad were trying at that time. No?
Pills ran out.
Okay, so.
And I never refilled them. I wasn't even thinking like that because it took me forever to get pregnant with Lauren.
Right. So kind of go through the process of when you lost the baby and how that truly affected not just you, but you and Dad, and how that kind of dampened your marriage a little bit.
You know, I wanted him to grieve like I grieved for this baby that we lost. He was dealing with the fact that I almost died.
Yeah.
And we were on two different islands at that point, you know, and I just was saying, you just don't understand. And he didn't, and he couldn't.
No, because he wasn't.
Nope.
As a male, I can't identify with how it feels to have a fetus growing in me and having that as a part of me. And you've experienced it 3 times before that, and you know how it feels in the connection that mothers have with their children
Even before
they are birthed.
Yes.
In the womb.
And you know, it was multiple things. I was very depressed after that happened. Yeah, I was really depressed. And it took a minute for me to come out of all of that. I had good friends that helped me out.
Yeah.
But I'd had to realize that he was grieving in his own way.
Right.
And yep, we lost a baby, but he almost lost me. And I guess I just really didn't realize in his mind,
He would have been a single dad of 3.
he'd have been a single dad of 3 with multiple sclerosis.
Yeah. And it all happened when he was having a flare up with MS.
Yes. Yep.
Because he stayed home with Shelly and Lauren because he couldn't get to church, and it was us there.
Right.
You and I. And so he had to come in that flare up. And
Yep. Sure did.
how do you think he became depressed? I remember, I don't remember if it was before or after you lost the baby, but we were at church, and I remember Dad just walking out of the sanctuary in tears.
Yes.
And I was like, I didn't see Dad cry a lot.
Oh my
And that
gosh.
was like,
You remember that?
I remember that.
We took him to a movie to try to cheer him up
'Cause
right after
we
church.
would sit his spot at the church. He had his own seat, unofficial seat. It was the 4th row from the back
On the
end. And I remember him getting out. You might have followed him and maybe a
I
minister or
did.
two.
Sister Miller went back there, and I think Pastor Greg was back there, and he was crying uncontrollably.
Yeah.
He could not get it together, and we realized at that point he was going into a depression.
Yeah.
And that we had to get some medication for that. You know, a long time the church would, you know, you don't need that, you know.
All you need to do is
just
pray and give it to God.
And so, you know, now we can pray and have a little medicine to help us along the way.
Right.
And so
I remember when you lost the baby, it was, I think, President's Day weekend.
no, Valentine's Day weekend.
It was Valentine's Day weekend. And you and Dad were engaged on Valentine's Day. And that could have been another, like, okay, I could have lost my wife this time.
Yeah.
And this is the time I got engaged. But I know as a kid, I didn't understand the severity of it.
Right.
And I just know my mom had a baby. She went to the hospital.
And
she came home. And, you know, Dad was saying, you know, your mom has a scar. She's cut. She has staples. And my biggest thing was I went to school and was telling people my mom had a miscarriage and she lost the baby. I just want to go home and see the incision and the staples, not knowing like you almost
I
died.
almost died. And I didn't want you guys to know that I almost died.
Right.
And you had a wonderful teacher because she made the whole class project making me get well stuff, on hearts because it was Valentine's.
Yeah.
And the kids, one of the little girls wrote something to me, or it might have been a boy, but it said, "I'm really sorry about your baby. It happened to my mom once."
I remember, and I know who it was. I'm not going to say his name.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that got me.
yeah. And I didn't realize as a kid, because we didn't discuss any of those traumatic things that women go through at that time. And
Right.
a lot of times it's a taboo topic for parents
Yes.
to talk to their kids about some of those issues. And, I'm thinking I'm the only one.
Yeah.
And I remember bugging Mrs. Patton all day. Can we make the cards yet? Can we make the cards yet? Can we make the cards yet?
And she said, "No, Nathan, not
No,
yet."
Nathan. So we talked about the toll that it took on you and how it affected you and Dad. And, it affected all of us.
Yeah.
And the older I got, and we discussed it too, like, that would have been my brother.
Yeah.
I don't have any brothers.
You don't have any brothers.
That would have been my brother. And what would he look like? Would he have been fat like I was? Or?
Shelley said for sure that she had a dream and that he had my green eyes and curly hair, but he was brown.
Yeah.
So, I will not know until I get to heaven.
Absolutely.
And his name was Jonathan Christian.
Jonathan Christian.
Yep.
I said if I ever had a kid, I'd name him Jonathan, but
Not
kids
now.
aren't in my future. So one of the, you had multiple heart attacks.
Yes.
And like I said in the intro, they weren't fatal. They were like small little attacks that gradually caused you to have some more major heart attacks. But once again, they weren't fatal. And I think the next one that I want to move into is when Dad became immobile. Like the time where he stopped walking. We experienced the decline. He went from walking to stumbling to using a cane to using crutches to going to a walker. But as I mentioned in, I think, Lauren's episode, there became a time where he could not get out of the chair, or you corrected me. You said, we got him out the chair, drug him on the sheet to the room, got him in the bed.
Pushed his big tail up in bed, got him all situated, and we go sit down, and it's like, whew.
Jackie.
What, Nate? I can't lay in here. My back is killing me.
And at that point, we knew we moved him back to the living room, and he stayed there for 6 weeks?
6 weeks.
6 weeks.
I know that sounds almost abusive, but it was a very nice lift chair.
Mm-hmm.
And I had all kind of pads under there. I washed him completely, dressed him in that chair every day.
Every day.
And the people that came for daycare, one of them told me after she knew what happened, that he couldn't get up. She said, "I thought he just got up every morning and was sitting in the chair."
Oh.
I said, "Oh, no."
We played it off well.
He was living in that chair.
I went to school and kids didn't know that I had a disabled dad. A lot of times because I didn't speak too much about Dad.
And there wasn't
too much to say. So they're like, "I didn't know you even had it." And I'm like, "Yeah, I had a dad." But this was the time where your role switched.
Oof.
You were no longer the wife.
Right.
You were the caregiver.
Yep. And it
that happened to be a wife on paper.
Transitioned kind of, sort of quickly. Yeah, it did.
So what was the experience? When did you realize you were no longer his wife, or you were his wife, but you were more of the caregiver than the wife? And what mind state did that put you in?
Well, his mind state would do some odd things. Like there was times that he thought that I was his mom. And I was like,
but early on,
are you
early
kidding?
on he thought?
Not that early, but he would have these like just times that he would think that I was his mom.
Right.
And I was like,
but going back to 70. The beginning, when did you feel that I switched off the wife, I flipped on the caregiver?
Nate, it's hard to really pinpoint exactly.
Or
now, there was one situation. He ended up with a blood clot in his lungs.
Yes. I think I was going through driver's training.
You were in driver's ed. And there was a storm as well.
It was a tornado. They wouldn't let anybody leave the school.
Anybody leave the school. And I told him, "Oh, yes, but he is."
She pulled into the back of the school, into the shop room.
Sure did.
I got in the car and they let me go.
Yes. And so we had my Aunt Jackie was with us too.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to Memorial Hospital, and he had to stay. And he was in there, that waiting room or that emergency room, for 8 hours.
Wow.
And then he had to stay at the hospital for probably a week to get everything situated.
And even though you had Shelly, me, Lauren, Grandma was around, you had daycare, you still felt some type of loneliness.
Oh my God. Yeah. I felt like no one could really understand what I felt unless they had went through it.
And there really wasn't too many people. We had Aunt Jackie who caregave for Uncle Kenny, but he had Alzheimer's. And that was a different situation on its own.
And he was late 80s when he died.
And his dad was diagnosed when he was
late 30s.
Late 30s. And he stopped walking
December of 2000.
Yeah. Almost 22 years ago.
Yeah. It was one of the big turning points was when he did lose his job, and he couldn't work anymore. His health took quite a dip at that point.
And when you talk about his health, he was fairly a healthy person. He didn't get sick often. He wasn't in and out of the hospitals too much.
He had no childhood diseases as a child. And that was one of the things that I read that could trigger MS. If it's there, it can be triggered by that. He had measles in college. Shelly gave him chicken pox just before our wedding.
And you talked about he got optic neuritis.
In college.
And it was probably around the time he got the measles.
Probably could have been.
And then the chicken pox, and 4 years later he was diagnosed.
Yep. But you know what? The biggest thing, Nate, was that I decided that I could only do one day at a time. I could not, and I had to figure out a system for myself. You know, he couldn't get up and go to the bathroom.
Right.
So thank God for Medicaid. Medicare too, but Medicaid, because they provided all of the incontinence supplies that I needed and things like that. And we had a system.
We had boxes get delivered. Did the incontinence supplies
porch
come?
Yep.
And if they did, we were bringing, I think, a boxing at a time, unpacking it, putting it in the cabinet.
Well, yeah, because he couldn't have elastic against the skin. It would cause a sore. So I had to cut all that out of the Depend.
Yeah.
They call them briefs, but they're not. It is a diaper, but it's a brief if you don't like to say that.
Right.
But we had to do all of that. And I had a certain way that I patted him up that
it was a system. And I remember watching you, and I didn't always do it the same way, but if you didn't do it right, you would have a mess on your hands.
Yes. But you know what? I am just thankful. So thankful for, all the help that you gave me, Nate.
Yeah.
Because it was a lot.
Family. We stick together.
It was a lot. And you tortured him too.
We all tortured him. But what is amazing to me is you didn't read any books. You didn't go to any classes. You didn't go to any trainings on how to care for someone that was disabled.
Nope.
It was like God gave you vision.
Yes.
God gave you ideas. You did what you needed to do, and it worked out.
And it worked. And if it didn't work, I revised it and would find a way to make it work.
Right. Because as I had mentioned in the first episode of just listen, failure is not an option.
No.
We could not throw our hands up, walk away. We had to find a different solution and a different process to solve
Yeah. I used to sit next to his bed after getting him ready, and I literally would be exhausted. And I'd sit down and I'd cry, and I said, God, I did not sign up for this. And after a few days of saying that, God was like, yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
And you made vows.
You made vows.
Not only to the congregation when you got married, but to God.
Yes.
For better or for worse, sickness and in health.
Yeah. I took that out of the vows this time. No, I didn't. No, I didn't, Melvin. No, I didn't.
Previously, we discussed those people in your support system, two people that truly had your back and made sure that you were okay were Grandma and Grandpa.
Yep.
Grandma was one of the best caregivers. Even before Dad got sick, she worked right in town. She would come by every day, check on us, bring us biscuits and gravy on Saturday morning.
Broken cookies from Porky's.
She would snitch stuff.
Stop it. Don't say that.
My grandma did not steal. She would say, I snitched this for you, Nate. Thanks, Grandma. I appreciate it. But she was one of the best caregivers. Not only did she care for Dad, but she made sure that the house in itself was...
Oh, yeah. Once Dad went to the nursing home, we couldn't have caregivers anymore. So the kids accused me of getting rid of our housekeepers. We had two. Cam.
I said
Cam was amazing.
My mom messed this up because almost he had a few caregivers that were a little iffy.
Oh.
But once towards the end, we had our people.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where my grandma was like, go ahead and here's an empty basket. You put all your dirty clothes in and you put a sign on it that says dirty. When you come home, it's going to be folded and you put it away.
And I told her, don't do that, Mom.
But she loved us.
Yeah. And she did it. She didn't care what I said.
No. And we talked about before how she passed. She was going to get her hair done, and then she had to go get her eggs. It was in the middle of a snowstorm. 4 days before Grandpa's birthday and the wedding anniversary? And
21st. It was the anniversary.
Yep.
She died on the 17th, I think.
Yep. And that was one of the, I will say, my first traumatic experience.
Right.
And so when that hit, it was like, I was not a crier. When dealing with Dad's disability, I had to turn my emotions off.
Yes.
And when she passed, I'm like, I don't know what to do. And my friends were like, just cry. You'll be fine. And I was ready to cuss every last one of them out. I'm like, my nose is stuffy. I can't breathe. I have a headache. Y'all talking about just cry. No, don't cry.
Yeah.
But, we all dealt with that. And how did that affect you in that time, dealing with Dad, experiencing the death, postponing her funeral 3 or 4 times because of how awful the...
And Grandpa put it in my hands.
Yeah.
He was like, Jackie's the deciding factor. Because my van, the battery and stuff went bad on the van right at that time.
When it rains, it pours.
When it snows, it freezes.
It does.
And that's exactly what happened. So, it was a lot.
And I remember you were on the phone like every morning with the funeral director. Okay, this is what the weather, this is what the radar says. And can we do it? Can we not do it? Can we get the hearse in the cemetery? Can we get the cars in the cemetery?
Right. It was crazy because it was so freezing cold.
Yeah.
And then there was snow and ice.
Yep. And that was one of our first big losses.
Yeah.
And we really didn't know how to grieve.
No.
And as you mentioned earlier, the Black communities and even many religious organizations shy away from seeking therapy to help process the grief and, all those experiences.
Right.
And I know that you eventually sought out some grief counseling to help you process that. What was the process like? How did the therapy help you overcome? Because I think they talk about 7 or 8 stages of grief. You have the anger, you have the doubt, you have the sadness, you have
And you know what? I never had any anger. I didn't have anger about losing my mom. She was, I don't even remember how old she was, Nate. 80 something.
But it's because we lived an optimistic life.
Yes.
And we know that
eventually,
I know that life happens, and
Yes.
eventually there is an expiration date for all of us. What are we going to do at that time? Are we going to sit and dwell and let life stop? Or are we going to keep going?
Well, we got to keep going. And so part of my keeping going was I went to the Center for Hospice, and they had free grief counseling, had a wonderful therapist. And she just listened. She just, the first few times was just, tell me about it. Tell me about you. Tell me about this. Tell me about that. And then she would give me a journal that I could write in. But it was just nice knowing that someone was like listening and understanding. And it wasn't about hugs and all that kind of stuff.
And it wasn't about telling you how you should grieve and what you should feel. And, well, I experienced this and it was a time for you to vent, debrief about your feelings.
Yep.
And eventually, maybe provide you with strategies on how to overcome certain emotions that you experience, because it comes in waves.
Yeah.
Some days we're like, Grandma did such and such, and other days it's like, I just want to hear.
Yeah.
I want to see your Lincoln pull up. One of the last major heart attacks you experienced was when Dad had that final major seizures, and he had a history of seizures. And I remember one of the first ones that he had was at Grandma and Grandpa's. I think it was Easter. I don't know if we call that a seizure,
It
but
really was
he like
not a
aspirated.
seizure.
He was
He was laughing, and he laughed himself into passing out, like losing air.
Okay.
And Uncle Johnny was terrified. He was trying to do the Heimlich. He thought he was choking.
The guy called 911.
Yeah.
He ended up going outside to the back of the house.
But we canceled the ambulance. They didn't come.
But I remember later on, he had multiple different types of seizures where it would, I think I talked about in one of the episodes, his answers were yep, nope. And the last one was major. He couldn't eat solid foods anymore. Yeah. We had to thicken all of his drinks. Yeah. And at that point, you realize you're at your point. You can't take one more thing.
And, part of that was the caregivers. They weren't as reliable. And they would only, the really good ones, even, they would only give a few hours to. No one could get over 32 hours. And they had more than one client. Yeah. And because if they were over 31 hours, they had to get benefits. Right. And they weren't going to give them any benefits. And that's really
awful.
It is awful. It is awful. And I hated it.
Take care of the people that take care of people.
Right. So, yes, that was a major thing.
Yeah.
So.
And that last one, he was hospitalized for it. And he didn't even come back home after that. He even had a seizure going into the CAT scan thing. They said he was seizing in there. There was a lot going on. And at that point, his mind started going. His thoughts.
His thoughts and.
I mean, they were gone, but they were even more off the wall than it normally was. Yes. And you consulted. I don't like to use the word consulted, but you discussed with Shelly, Lauren, and I, what you can't do anymore, and what is probably going to have to happen. I know it started off as like a rehab type thing, but
that was super hard for me. Yeah, for you guys, I was like, oh my gosh, and it was like this. There's a word for it, and I can't think of it. But something that really needed to happen, but it was bittersweet. That's not what I'm looking for, but that's not the word.
But it was bittersweet.
It was bittersweet.
Because you were able to, you didn't have to, because you went back to work at this time.
It was a guilt. I felt guilty for feeling relieved. Right. And then he was in this nursing home, and I had to shake them up because they wouldn't
give subpar care, and
we won't even go into all of that. But yeah, they couldn't even get his pants on straight. Right, two or three of them, and I could do it by myself.
By yourself, Lauren, when she was in high school, could get him dressed or cleaned up, dressed and in his chair by herself.
Yes. So yeah, don't.
No, and I'm not knocking any place, but if you,
I'm knocking that place.
Well, yeah, we are going to knock them. Because I honestly think, God had a plan.
God had a plan.
He knew what was going to happen, and he knew what needed to happen. But I honestly think if they would have taken better care,
that sore would not have gotten. That sore.
And then I talked about before. I keep saying I talked about before. Well, I talked about before. Like I went to visit him, and it was in a time where they were changing him. And they turned him over, and right above his tailbone was a hole like the size of my fist. Like I swore I could put my fist in it.
And they didn't even have a vacuum on it.
They didn't have anything. They took him to the wound center at that point in his wheelchair.
I was livid.
You were ready to
yeah.
Your guns were blazing.
And I did have an inside source that was trying to keep me up on things. And I would never ever give her away.
No.
But
or him. We're not gonna say what gender it was.
No. Or them. They. But yeah, that was really difficult I never ever wanted him to be hurt.
So 2 years after he was in the nursing home, he passed away due to the complications of not being cared for properly. That was traumatic for all of us.
Yep.
And how did you begin to heal from that? How did you regulate your heartbeat? How did you keep your heart muscle healthy? How did you keep the blood flowing?
One of the very first things that I did was I called the assistant director at the nursing home,
Mm-hmm.
told him off completely.
I remember that.
Uh-huh. Yeah, because he was full of it. But
Mhm.
anyway, it took a long time, even though he wasn't here
Mm-hmm.
at the house, driving past the street. It still gets emotional for me.
Yeah.
You know, I hate that place. And I hate that he had to be there.
I didn't get emotional driving past it. I still get pissed
Angry.
off.
Yeah.
And I flip him the bird every time I
Oh, no.
I do.
You don't.
Yep.
But, you know, I didn't stay alone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had friends. I did not date around. I dated one person and I married him.
Shout out Melly Mel.
Yep. That's my honey. So it really turned out, you know, before we got married and stuff, Melvin and I, you know, he would take me on trips and take me and do things. And crazy that it may sound, he would get my oil changed, fill my car up, all that kind of stuff that your dad wasn't able to do.
Right.
Your dad was on the cheap side, so he was not going to fill my tank up before
But I won't let you say that, because I remember Dad wanted to get you flowers and buy you things, and you had you took his credit card away from him.
Big Nate, he was ordering stuff off TV and ordering things when they would call from IU, ordering these books and stuff. So I did have to pull the card.
Right.
So,
but it sounded like you did a lot of self-care at that point.
Yeah, I did.
You focused on what you needed.
Yep.
To heal.
Yep. I got an insurance license, and I worked at 3 different insurance places. And the one that I'm at now, I plan to be there till I retire. I love where I work. And
so the holidays are approaching us, and I remember after Dad passing, I wrote a Facebook post that said, many holidays become hard after a passing of a loved one, and I've learned that I must celebrate the life and continue the legacy. It is totally normal to be emotional because of the absence, but we must continue to celebrate and honor those that have groomed us to be the people that they taught us to be. You have taught me that I cannot dwell on the things out of my control, and that I need to focus on the good times, be in the present, and the many memories that we have with those people.
Yes.
I am so thankful for you, Mother, for always showing us how strong a person can be. You haven't, and you have not, will not let anything stop you from allocating time for the things that mean the most to you. Regardless of what goes on, you always pull through. You're the best. I love you.
I think I love you more, Nate.
I don't think so. My love is unmatchable.
No, I love you more.
Nope, we're not going to get to the argument. My love's unmatchable. And as always, take time throughout your day to check on the status of your heart. How regulated is your heartbeat? Is your heart muscle healthy? Are you keeping the blood circulating? I'm Nate, and you're listening to Vital Organs, paramount to the physical, mental, and spiritual well-being.